All right, here we go again. We got another Ohtani trade proposal. This time it's from the Padres. Would you say yes to this trade? We'll talk about that. And who should bat in front of Mike Trout? Because we need somebody who can get on base so that Mike Trout can hit them in. And why are the Halos just in such a desperate place at shortstop? We're going to share some stats and we're going to share some players that maybe could solve our shortstop issue. You're Locked On with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
John and I thank you for making Locked On Angels first listen today. Every show is free and available on all platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the best way to help us out is by giving the show a rate and a review. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can help the show out by liking and commenting and subscribing and clicking the bell to be notified every time a new episode drops.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Mike, it's November 1st, so I'm out of the hot dog costume for this episode.
Yeah.
I guess I've never looked better, apparently. That's what a lot of people were saying. So,
yeah, those comments were great.
What are you going to do? Listen, you and I have been fans for a very long time of this team, and so we feel qualified to speak on some of the ins and outs of this team and their offseason approach, and that includes a lot of conversation around Shohei Ohtani and the potential that he would get traded. Now, you and I don't think that he's going to be traded by this Halo team. However, that hasn't stopped a lot of outlets from putting out trade proposals. We covered a Dodgers trade proposal last week, and this week we're getting into a trade proposal from Bleacher Report about the Padres. So why don't you run us down some Shohei Ohtani stats and then the trade proposal?
Well, he's unbelievable. He's the unicorn, right?
Yes.
And this is why we love him. So here's just two really quick thoughts to remind you, the listener, and to remind us, the hosts, of how great he is, all right? So only 2 AL pitchers struck out more batters last year than Shohei Ohtani, and only 3 AL hitters hit more home runs than Shohei Ohtani. So this guy is insane. This guy is incredible. So this is why everybody wants Shohei. So, Johnny, let's talk about these players. Here's the trade proposal from the Padres. First, the best part of the trade is Blake Snell. Now, Blake Snell is a great starting pitcher. He was the guy that got yanked in the World Series when he was with the Tampa Bay Rays. Shouldn't have been pulled, and then the Dodgers ended up coming back, and of course, we all know they won that series.
You know, we just got through talking about analytics on the last episode and the good and the bad, and we talked about Brad Ausmus being a bad example of analytics. There's another bad example of analytics. You don't let Blake Snell go through the order a third time, even though he's cruising through the Dodgers order. Good grief.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to give you 3 players, and then we can talk about them specifically. But the 3 other players that are mentioned in this trade are Trent Grisham, Jackson Merrill, and Luis Campusano, and then a low single-A unnamed prospect, kind of like, hey, we're going to throw that in as well. So, Johnny, Trent Grisham really didn't have that great of a season last season.
Yeah.
He had a 626 OPS. He had a 184 batting average. He played center field for the Padres.
I think he had about 17 home runs, which is surprising, for that guy. I mean, you don't think of him as a power threat all the time, but 17 home runs, pretty respectable for a center fielder.
Yeah, I think that is kind of maybe an analytics issue as well, because this guy was, trying to have exit velocity on his bat. Maybe he was trying to hit more home runs than maybe trying to actually make contact, maybe a la Squid. Squid kind of did that this last season too, right? Now, Jackson Merrill actually is the 83rd overall prospect, and he's projected to arrive in the major leagues by 2025. Now, tell me if this sounds familiar. He's 19 years old. He's a top prospect, and he is a shortstop. Sounds very similar to a few of the players that the Angels have, like Zach Neto. We'll talk about him in a minute, and Logan O'Hoppe, right? Like, it sounds very similar to those guys. Now, Luis Campusano is a catcher. He's a bit older, 24 years old. Now, he's played for 3 seasons for the Padres. He's only played in 28 games in those 3 seasons. And then, of course, there's this kind of throwaway, hey, we'll throw in a low single A unnamed prospect. We'll let the Angels kind of pick him out. And then the Angels would get Shohei Ohtani. Johnny, when we talked about the Dodgers trade rumors and the names that came out, I think you and I both agreed that those names were incredibly strong. In fact, you had a moment where you went, I might do this, right? And we had a listener that talked on the show yesterday, and they said, I think I would pull the trigger on that Dodgers trade. How do you feel about this trade proposal from the Padres to get Shohei Ohtani?
Where's the sixth player?
Right?
That's my question.
Immediately, that stands out, right?
Who's this unnamed prospect in low A that we're getting? And where is the sixth player that you need to put in a deal for Shohei Ohtani? You do not take anything less than 6 players if you are going to trade for Shohei Ohtani. And that's the offseason. Look, if the Angels ended up trading Shohei in the middle of next season because we were just bottom of the barrel, where there's no chance of us getting to the playoffs, then I might understand, okay, half a season of guaranteed Shohei. It's a win now move for whoever trades for him. 3 players, 3 really good players. Give me that. Because at this point, if you want a full year of Shohei Ohtani to do both sides of the plate for you, pitching and hitting, it's got to be 6 players. And if that trade proposal from the Dodgers is any indication, like that's my bar, Mike. So far, that's the only proposal that's ever made me go, that's pretty good.
And they're named players, John.
Yes,
they're not
correct.
and we can maybe give them like a couple of prospects and a player to be named later. You can't do that with Shohei. This is a totally undefined, undetermined direction. Like you have to be able to say, here's the 6 guys. And when I look at this list, John, the only name that I get excited about is Blake Snell, but Blake Snell doesn't replace Shohei in the starting rotation.
No, not at all.
Blake Snell is what, number 2, number 3
yeah.
in our starting rotation right now with the Halos. And so I don't think that we're getting great quality back. And I mentioned Trent Grisham, like Trent doesn't feel like an upgrade for our outfield. It feels like Brandon Marsh again. That's really what it feels like. He's a great defensive player. And then when I look at Jackson Merrill, we've got him. His name's Zach Neto. He's kind of in the same vein. And if he's projected to show up in 2025, I think the Angels have to get players that are going to show up in at the latest 2024.
Yeah. And as far as Luis Campisano, we've got a catcher in Logan O'Hoppe that we're very excited about. Yeah. We've got a potential top 100 prospect in Edgar Caro waiting in the wings. He's, lower minor leagues, but he'll be there someday. And that's somebody that we're really excited about as well. And again, this low single A prospect who is unnamed, that feels like a throwaway. It doesn't feel like enough. Yeah. So to me, I mean, the other thing I have to consider is, haven't the Padres depleted their system?
Say, maybe that's why it's kind of and then somebody down in the low A system.
Yeah.
Maybe they can't think of names because they don't have anybody anymore. They traded everybody away.
The Nationals got a haul for Juan Soto. I mean, they traded for Yu Darvish to the Cubs or from the Cubs. And so they got Blake Snell from the Rays. So they had to trade some pieces there. Look, I don't fault the Padres for using the minor leaguers to get the players they need to get to the playoffs.
Right.
And we saw that pay off this season, but they've used up a lot of their minor leaguers to get the pieces that they need over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So I'm just not confident in who they have left. I understand Snell and Grisham are major leaguers, but like you said, Snell is not replacing Shohei in the rotation. Now, if there was another move to get Snell and we still had Shohei Ohtani, then yes, absolutely. Then you have your 1 and 2 punch in your rotation with those guys. But to swap Shohei with Blake Snell, I don't see it. I'm not confident in this trade. This one came from Bleacher Report. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate the effort, but I think I would say no at this.
Well, coming up on Locked On Angels, you've seen it and we've seen it, and now we have the stats to prove it. We'll share the numbers that prove that the Halos desperately need a shortstop. So we're going to talk about some of those names that are out there right now and see which one is the best bet for the Halos. And speaking of betting, Locked On Angels is brought to you by Bet Online. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your football betting info and the start of the NBA season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth articles, and analysis on every game that you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. And their bet lines are usually pretty spot on. So if you use BetOnline to give you direction, you're going to find yourself in the money. So the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events is betonline.net. Check out MLB World Series, MMA, boxing, golf, all the sports, all the time. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
We want to thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. And for your second listen, you got to check out Locked On Sports Today. Listen, I know Monday Night Football and Game 3 of the World Series were last night, and if you missed out on either one, you can check out Locked On Sports Today because they cover the games that matter the most and the biggest stories in sports. So you can go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Johnny, Mike Trout played about 115 to 119 games last season because of his career-ending injury in his back, and then he came back.
Degenerative, horrible back injury. He'll never recover.
The media was degenerative when they talked about him. But when he came back, you and I threw out this stat. It would be great if Mike Trout finished the season strong by hitting, 40 home runs, right? And it was as if he heard us, and I think he did because he hit 40 home runs.
He makes Locked On Angels his first listen of the day. That's for sure.
Hey, Mike, we're glad you're here.
Hi, Mike.
Only Mikes are welcome here, or other people too, but Mikes are really important around here. So here's his stats. I mean, he had 40 home runs. It's the second time in his career, or the third time? Third time? I'm gonna have to look that up. Where third. Mike Trout has hit 40 home runs. Now, here's the ridiculous stat, Johnny. He tied the MLB record for fewest RBIs when he hit 40 home runs. He only had 80 RBIs.
Who'd he tie with? Himself, because of the Angels' pathetic offense in the last few years?
I didn't look that one up. Let's hit the producer and have him find that. But here's why his RBIs were so low. Listen to this. He had, in his at-bats, 18.4% of his plate appearances came with runners in scoring position. So 92 out of his 499 plate appearances, he had runners in scoring position.
Good grief.
18.4%. Now, here's the average MLB wide. It's 24, almost 25%. So that means everybody else, 25% of their at-bats, they had runners in scoring position. Mike Trout, he had 18% of the time he had runners in scoring position. Johnny, how do we fix this? What do we need to do? Do we need to move Trout? Do we need to put him somewhere in the lineup differently? Do we need to adjust two bats in front of him? Who are the players? There's a lot to talk about here. So why don't you get us started? How does John fix this issue so that Mike Trout can get to the 100 RBI plateau, knock in those runs, and help the Angels get a victory?
You know me, Mike. I like David Fletcher in the leadoff spot, and I feel like he would serve very well at number one. And depending on who the Angels get over the offseason, maybe there's a more true table setter, more true number one guy, and maybe Fletch goes down to number 9. But I love Fletch at number 1. Honestly, number 2, Anthony Rendon. I know his bat has not been as good, and we've never had a full season other than 2020, but that was a 60-game season. But his on-base percentage, he has the ability to take walks. His on-base percentage is strong. He'll hit doubles. As we all know, he's Tony Two Bags. And so he immediately gets into scoring position. I love Trout at number 3. And with Shohei kind of becoming a slugger in the last 2 years, why not bat him cleanup? Why not put runners in front of Shohei? Put your 1 through 3s on base so that Shohei can hit a home run and hit those guys in. And Trout has kind of taken the same trajectory in his career. He is swinging and slugging the most that he has in his career. I know the strikeout rate has kind of gone up, but that's kind of the trade-off when you get older, but you're also stronger and you're also more experienced. So to me, I would love a 1-4 of Fletcher, Rendon, Trout, and Shohei. How would you fix this?
Well, I think that the issue is health. And I think that the health of Taylor Ward is what impacted this, because the Taylor Ward that started the season in the leadoff spot was the guy that we've needed for years in the leadoff spot. Now, he ran into a wall. He got hurt. He was not the same. And then we actually advocated for him to move to the cleanup spot because, again, the OPS for the top 3 versus 4 through 9 was terrible. I think the Angels will have a bit more of a balanced lineup because they're going to get healthy again. And we anticipate that they're going to make some moves to balance this lineup out. So I'm not giving up on Taylor Ward leading off just yet, depending on the moves that they make. Now, if they do make some moves and they get a very obvious leadoff hitter, then yeah, man, put that guy there and let's go at it. But I think that a healthy Taylor Ward actually benefits Mike Trout in a really significant way because Ward gets on base. But what I like about Ward is he has a great eye. And that's where when he moved to the cleanup spot, we were excited because he did have a bat, could knock in some runs. But Taylor Ward drew walks at what I felt were the wrong times. He needed to be swinging the bat, right? Because we needed some runs. We didn't need base runners. We needed somebody to knock in those runs because you had Trout and Ohtani. They're first and second, and then Ward draws a walk, and then the base is loaded. And then who's up next? Well, it's, Phil Gosselin, or it's Squid or something like that, right? And then we're like, oh, great. Well, this inning is over. And so I think that I'd like to see Taylor Ward run it back and a healthy Taylor Ward run it back. And I think that actually could be a game changer for the Halos because Ward's got 100 runs scored in the season written all over him if he's batting leadoff and he's getting on base at a 360 clip OPS or like on base percentage, and he's got Trout and Ohtani hitting behind him.
Now let me dream here for a minute because I mentioned this in my GM episode, and I know it's going to cost more than what I originally said because his market value actually went up about $7 million from the time I did my research to the time we did our episode.
Because you're talking about him.
Exactly. Brandon Nimmo from the Mets is projected to get about like $21 million a year, something like that. Right. Man, he is the perennial table setter. I would love to see that guy lead off for us. Can you imagine if he's leading off, taking walks, Tony Two Hips is hitting a double or getting on base through a walk, and then you have Trout coming up to hit those guys in? I think that could be a complete game changer. And you really have to think about your number 9 hitter. If you have a number 9 hitter and he gets on base, even if 1 and 2 get outs, you still have number 9 on base for Mike Trout. So I think we have to consider who might be at number 9. We need somebody fast. We need a speedster. Perhaps if you have Taylor Ward at 1, you do have Fletcher at 9. And those are your kind of prototypical leadoff guys. And I know number 1 only leads off once theoretically in a game, right? I mean, it's not guaranteed he leads off more than once, but if you've got Fletcher and then you get to Ward and then Rendon, oh man, I like the way this is shaping up. And I think we can put a lot of people in front of Mike Trout to get him more RBIs on the season for sure.
Johnny, the main shortstop for us last year was Squid, and he was somebody that we liked defensively. And when you looked at this lineup early on, April, May, we were really confident that the lineup could fulfill what was necessary to score runs and kind of hide Squid away, right?
And it did. It did. We scored
it did for a while.
A ton, yeah, until everybody got hurt.
When everybody got hurt, everything fell apart, right?
Also, can we just talk about how big of a joke the Gold Gloves are? The fact that Andrew Velasquez was not a finalist at shortstop. Give me a break.
Didn't he have like 47,000 defensive run saves and he didn't get considered? Yeah, I think that stat's accurate, 47,000.
Yes.
But he was our main shortstop. But then we did have a rotation of guys in there. We've talked a lot about Soto. I know Fletch was in there when he was healthy. Rengifo, of course, was at short. And a lot of people bounced around. So, Johnny, these stats are influenced by the players from this last season. But here's what's interesting is this shortstop issue isn't just a last season issue. The shortstop issue has been an issue for a while. So why don't you take us through some of the stats that the Angels have put up at the shortstop position since 20 2019, Johnny.
Yeah, in 2019, of course, we had Andrelton Simmons. He
Yep.
spent some time on the IL a few times in 2019 and 2020. And then we had Jose Iglesias play for us in 2021, and he was not great defensively. He had a better bat. Then, of course, we had Squid most of the season. I know Tyler Wade spent some time there as well before he was released. Listen to
Yeah.
this. Since 2019, here are the shortstop rankings for the Halos. Last in home runs, 28th in runs, last in RBIs, walk percentage, 28th, batting average, we're tied for 18th. And that's probably because of Simmons and Iglesias. And
Yeah.
then it fell off after that.
Right.
On base percentage, 28th. Again, not getting on base. Slugging is last.
Yeah.
Weighted on base percentage, last.
Ooh.
My favorite stat, weighted runs created plus, tied for 28th.
Good
And
grief.
Fangraphs WAR, so wins above replacements from Fangraphs, 28th.
Wow.
Man, nothing above 28, Mike.
No, not at all, except for average.
Yes, you're right.
That's it. Unreal.
So the fact that we just went through these stats, we need a great shortstop. And I know that you and I did our best to try and get the Angels in around 200 million in our GM episode, because that's where we predict they would end up in the offseason. They're not known to be spending close to the luxury tax, even though it is now 233 million. They have a lot more room than they have in the past, but it doesn't mean that Artie is going to approve getting right up to the luxury tax. So with that in mind, there are some star shortstops out there that could greatly improve these numbers. So why don't you take us through some of those?
All right, so let's talk reasonable or dream as we talk about these players. So the first one that is out there is Carlos Correa. He has stated that he's going to opt out of his contract, and he had a $35 million a year deal with the Twins, and he's now going to opt out. Now, there is a caveat to this. The Dodgers, who are printing money, they're now the Yankees of today, right? They're printing money. There's a report that if they can't sign Trey Turner, who we'll talk about in a second, that they're going to go after Correa. So, Johnny, is Carlos Correa a reasonable option, or do you think that he's a dream for Angel fans to have on our team?
Oh man, I mean, at 35 million, I feel like we would go down the same road that we would with somebody like Anthony Rendon. I know Correa has not had a lot of healthy seasons in the past, and so to me, to see him come in and be a shortstop is a reasonable move in the sense that it would greatly improve your results at shortstop.
Yeah.
But at $35 million a year, that feels like a dream, Mike.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think that's a dream as well. I don't think he's coming just simply because his price point is so high.
And it's going to be competitive with the Dodgers and all those guys.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's going to be, because he did opt out and he didn't have a great year, if there will be a yearly total that will be a bit under 35. But I think if he's going to opt out, then I think his agent has said, no, you can at least get that and get that with a good team. I don't think he would have opted out if he didn't think he'd get that. So I think he's a dream. Speaking of dreams, I think that Trey Turner is going to be a dream for us. I don't think that he is going to sign with the Halos. I think he's too high of a price point, 33 million. I would rather have him over Correa because he seems to be a bit more of a consistent offensive player, and that's what we need. Defensively, he's not fantastic, which
he's better at second base.
He is better at second base. And he said he wants to go back to the East Coast. So in my opinion, Trey Turner is in the dream category for me. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's a dream as well. And I feel bad saying it because these are all great players to have, but I just don't see the Angels going for such a big splash in the offseason, given what we've already seen in terms of the new ownership coming in and bringing back Phil Nevin for a year. That, to me, I like Phil Nevin, but that screams holdover, right? And it's not a big move. And obviously the next ownership group will want to come in and pick their players and GMs and coaches and all that stuff. But I feel like Phil Nevin coming back for another year is a big indication of how the Angels are going to handle this offseason.
Now, okay, let's talk 2 players here then, because
Okay.
these might be the most reasonable if we're going to make a semi big splash, but their market value feels like a big splash. So there's Dansby Swanson,
Mm-hmm.
who has been a part of the Braves and has had a really good season. His market value is about 24 million. And then Xander Bogaerts has indicated that he is probably going to opt out of his contract. If he doesn't, he's signed until 2025, but his price point is about 25 million. Now, some of Locked On Angel listeners have said they would like Bogaerts on our team.
Yeah.
Of those 2, are those big splashes, John, or do you think that one of them is a reasonable choice that could end up on the Angels next season?
I've got thoughts about each. I think they're both dreams.
Okay.
I would love to see Xander Bogaerts. That would be incredible.
Yeah.
Dansby Swanson, to me, at that price, is also a dream. And I'm
Yeah.
also concerned that Dansby is this year's Zach Cozart.
Ooh, yeah.
I was really
Stay
excited.
away.
I was really excited for Zach Cozart when we got him, considering the season he had just come off of with the Reds, and he was crushing it. Now, probably should have guessed that him hitting at Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati was not the best reflection of the player that he could be.
Sure.
But also, he was hurt a lot
Yeah.
through his tenure, and then we had
Yeah.
to trade him and our number 1 pick to the Giants just to get rid of him and his salary, which,
Right.
oh yeah, what a move, right? So to me, I'm concerned about Swanson because this has really been a great year for him. I am afraid of having whiplash from the Zach Cozart deal. So I understand Bogaerts probably 25 million or something like that. I'm sure he'll ask for more considering he is going to opt out. But to me, that would be ideal if the Angels somehow were able to do that. Again, I think it's a dream because of the price point, but I would really like Bogaerts if we were able to get him. How about you?
Now that we fully depressed all of our listeners and
I know.
watchers on YouTube, right? Like, yeah, we went through all the big guys and we're like, nope, dream, nope, dream. And so everybody's listening going, I hate you. And I feel that, I totally feel that because I think out of all those guys, I think Bogaerts would be the most reasonable. I would push back on Dansby. I went and looked at his stats and he's actually been pretty consistent over the last few years since he got to Atlanta. He's improved as he's stayed there. And so I don't know if he would be a Zach Cozart, but I don't think that he would be the same guy that he was in Atlanta because he is a year older and all of those things factor into it. Bogaerts just seems like a guy who can figure it out and he's just got a sweet swing and he's smooth. Plus he's a great defensive shortstop. So if we get anybody, it would be one of those guys. And the reason why I would say that all of them are a dream, and I think you would agree with me, is simply because the conversation is, can we be competitive with Trout, Ohtani, and Rendon and their contracts? And would we want to add another big contract? Now, with the luxury tax as high as it is, there's room. You can totally do that. The problem is we just don't think that the Angels will do that. And that's why we look at all of this and say, it just feels like a dream. It doesn't feel reasonable for us.
They can do it if that's the only free agent that they get in the offseason.
Yeah.
But you and I and all the fans know, and those listening to Locked On Angels know, that we have to spread the wealth and we have to be efficient with the remaining dollars in the payroll. And I don't think that you can make a big splash and then expect to have a better bullpen, have a better left fielder, right? Get some starting pitching. You're going to have to really count on your minor leaguers, maybe some of those guys in AA to come up and pitch, because otherwise you're in trouble without spreading the wealth around. And so the Angels and Perry Manassian are really going to have to do some maneuvering to get all the things that they need in the offseason if they go that route. Now, having said all that, I do feel like...
give us some hope.
Considering the Angels are last through 28th in most stats, except for average, which was 18th.
Yeah.
It wouldn't take much to get a shortstop who can improve those stats. So if the focus here is to be better in those categories, then I don't think you need to go out and get the superstars. I think you can go out and get somebody that can.
Perry Manassian's calling me. And because I hit pretty good in softball. So
you can't play short. Don't be ridiculous.
No, I can't.
But all I'm saying is,
you're right.
It wouldn't take much if you had to go a lesser known route for shortstop and possibly even get a second baseman to move Fletcher over to shortstop and let him play full time right there. all that to say, it wouldn't take much to improve these stats. And if the Angels want to go out and make an improvement, they've got to at least get a shortstop or a second baseman this offseason to really help that middle infield.
Well, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. Now for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. They share some of the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and of course, their take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On Angels. You can reach the show there, and you can reach Mike and I at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. We're always posting there and going back and forth in the comments, so we love interacting with you. And on YouTube, be sure to comment below. Give us your thoughts on today's episode. Mike, I cannot wait for tomorrow's episode because
I'm excited. Yeah, we started on April 11th of this year and took over for the previous host. His name is Steve Granado.
Yes, sir.
And he will be joining us tomorrow. And so we're gonna fanboy over Steve. We're excited to have him. We'll find out what he's been up to. We'll get his thoughts on all things Halos. If he was the owner, what would be his first decision? Lots to talk about. Steve Granado joins us, Locked On Angels Hall of Famer, tomorrow on Locked On Angels.
He's a legend, and we're excited to have him on. Until then, we will see you tomorrow. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Locked On Angels, and we look forward to you joining us tomorrow.